So they're both 50k roads. Ness Street is got one. Ness Street has got priority, and O'Hara Street has 2 giveaways, but it's the only giveaway on O'Hara Street. So coming up from the east, or sorry, never east, from the west on O'Hara Street, you've got the whole run up from State Highway through to Ellis Road, and Ellis Road is where South City, one of our suburbs, is along Ellis Road. So, and it's the first road that you can get a good run through to run up into South City off State Highway.
Right.
So,
yeah, so straight run up there and then a giveaway.
Yeah, and so people are herring up, getting not playing a blind bit of gnosis to the giveaway for Ness Street, and having T crashes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, right. Okay. Interesting.
Probably the traffic count on both streets. Ness is about 1,000 a day, so not huge traffic numbers, and O'Hara is probably about 800 a day.
Okay. Okay. So that leads us in there to talk about exposure to crashes. What are our factors, or what's influencing the exposure to crashes here? What are your thoughts, Leslie?
My thoughts, the exposure is what's it called, a T-bone crash type scenario. Could we shut off O'Hara Street at one of the intersections? Potentially, but our whole network is a grid network, so if we were going to do that here, I feel we'd probably be forced to do it across the entire city.
Yeah, right. Okay. All
So
right, let's step back a bit. So you jumped into a solution. We're just trying to unpack the issue, I suppose, first, and that's I suppose there's quite a bit of time spent in safe system assessing, really getting to understand what is the issue first, and then looking, because there's multiple ways that we can lessen risk. So in terms of exposure, we're thinking about how many people are exposed to crashes here. What's influencing that? Now, you already gave us some clues there with the numbers of vehicles on these 2 roads, which is the exposure. What about pedestrians and cyclists? So are there any?
So continuing on Ness Street in the direction you're facing is a school, so there's a lot of cyclists and people walking along this straight through, especially.
Okay, right. So we've got a pedestrian or cyclist generator. So the schools, so people coming to and from that. And okay, so we've got some idea on volumes of traffic. Probably, do we have any ideas on volumes of pedestrians and cyclists, or we just know there's some?
Just anecdotal that there's quite a few, but no counts.
Yeah. Okay. And motorcycles, probably no counts.
No counts, no.
Yeah. So we'll probably take about 1 to 2% of traffic of AADT usually would say that's a good gauge for motorcycles in an area like this. If it was a very popular motorcycle route, we'd obviously have something different. Okay, so that's giving us a bit of an idea on exposure, and I suppose you're right to think about, well, what are the crash types there that we're concerned of? So vehicle to vehicle crashes, as you mentioned, that right angle T-bone style crash. Then you've got pedestrians, cyclists being struck in different ways, and there is run-off road and head-on potential, albeit that it may be a lower severity, but we'll get to that. But there's still certainly the ability there to for vehicles to run off the road. Okay, so let's look at likelihood factors now. Okay, what are some of the things in this intersection and surrounding environment that are influencing the chance that a crash is going to happen?
So when is just for this intersection, or is it zooming out in a sense that zooming out, Ness has no giveaways along it, so people use it as a priority, but then O'Hara has no giveaways to the right there as you're going down, so people are coming up at speed as well. So and they don't, the likelihood of giving way is low because they have the speed and the visibility actually through sitting at the giveaways is not great either, with fences and trees, etc.
Yep. Okay. So I think that certainly is a good one. So that I suppose out of context give way in the sense of having gone through multiple intersections. So that's certainly a likelihood factor, really good one. I mean, the ability to see the giveaway controls, the see-through effect, I think there. I mean, the straight run of it, the fact that you've got an obvious down here, there's obviously going to need to be some giveaways, so people will be looking through to that and may, inadvertently miss this. So they're all good ones. What about for pedestrians, cyclists? Any factors there?
I'm sure there is.
Yeah. So I suppose sometimes we look at, well, what is not there, not just what is there, but what's not there. We don't have any facilities for, priority crossing or anything like that for pedestrians. They have a fairly wide crossing distance in any direction. Cyclists have the cycle lane, which will reduce the likelihood of crashes a little bit, but certainly there's no physical protection there. So then we've got some lighting, and it'd be interesting to have a look at this site at night. Not that you have to for this exercise, but it's a small flag light there. Then in terms of things like run-off road likelihood and the like, the straight alignment probably helps in reducing the run-off road. The curbing, the line marking are all sort of helping in that sense. The fact that there's a bit of turbulence in the fact that there's an intersection there may increase the likelihood of run-off road. I don't know if there is a history of vehicles running off the road into these properties, but that's always a possibility as they make those mistakes or the like.
The crash data is more that there's the properties next door get damaged after the crash rather than are the crash.
Yeah, okay. So they secondary crash.
Yeah.
Yep. No, that makes sense. Okay. Well, let's talk about then severity of crash here. What's influencing the severity of any crash that will happen?
Speed.
Speed's the big one.
And angle.
And angle. Well done. Yeah, okay. So that for passenger vehicle ones, we got that speed and angle combination. Now, we would be thinking operating speeds, trying to get a gauge for what would be happening in operating speeds rather than necessarily speed limits. But yeah, we've got that speed and angle combination. Certainly when we think about pedestrians and cyclists, the speed of vehicles through there is going to be, it's high for those types of crashes. In terms of things like run-off road, and some of you might sort of be scratching your head as to why I'm keep mentioning runoff road in this scenario, because you might sort of intuitively be saying that's not really the issue. You'll discover as we get into the safe system assessing, sort of the way you have to do the assessment next session is that we sort of force you to, well, you are forced to, under the way a safe system assessment is done, assess runoff road and head on in every environment. Now, it may be that you go, well, the likelihood of runoff road is low, or the likelihood of head on is low, and the severity is low because of the speeds or whatever it is. So all over the risk is low, but you still have to actually assess that. So when I'm thinking about the severity of head on here, I'm thinking about this being sort of below that 70 km/h speed we generally think of as the head on threshold. So severity is likely to be in the lower end of that. And for runoff road, there's not a huge amount of sort of fixed specific point source hazards. We've got the light pole, rigid light pole there, but we got a lot of sort of fences and areas. So severity wise, I don't think the severity of runoff road incidents would be bad. Obviously, if they run off the road, hit pedestrians and cyclists and the like, that's going to be bad. That's captured in the pedestrian and cyclist thinking. Okay, great. So what were you thinking would be so you mentioned there, Leslie, already an idea you had in terms of blocking off. I'm not sure which leg you were thinking of blocking off there.
Yeah, it would probably be that left-hand turn there, probably would be.
So on O'Hara, so here?
Yeah, but it would just force the problem down another street.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's an interesting discussion point around safe system assessing, is what's the scope of what we are assessing, and if we push issues to other areas, how do we need to consider that? So you usually end up, you're doing a safe system assessment on one specific intersection like this one. I'm just going to take the labels off that so I can. No, I'm not. I want me to do that. There we go. So if we were to somehow block this off and push it to another way, do we capture that in our safe system assessment? Well, we sort of assess this general area if that's the scope of our work, but we may note in there the possibility for that to push the issue to other areas. But you kind of, if you go too far with that, you'll end up doing the whole of Invercargill as a safe system assessment, and it'll be the biggest thing anybody's ever sort of done. So you kind of do have to isolate it a little bit. I do note those sorts of things. But what else? Oh, sorry. If we were to do that now, sorry, let me just clarify that, Leslie. Are you saying block this as in make it left in only, or?
Yeah. No, as in you could potentially close completely as a through street.
Yeah. So close this off. So anybody who needs to access those properties comes in from this way only and comes out that way.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. So what would that influence in terms of exposure or likelihood or severity at this intersection?
Well, it would stop people running straight through and having a 90-degree crash.
Yeah. So it would influence the exposure to crashes from the sense that there'd be less people entering into that intersection. We still do have the possibility of intersection crashes, and not quite that direct, straight across right angle crash, but certainly we still have the possibility of vehicles sort of turning in, getting struck, coming out and getting struck. So we haven't eliminated intersection crashes there altogether. If we blocked off this one as well, then we have. But if we just block off one, we've lessened the exposure to intersection crashes and lessened the likelihood, because there's less conflict points and less ways to crash. What other options are there apart from closing this off?
My other ones was deflecting, so a roundabout, or slowing them down with the platform.
Okay, so let's take those then. What would you say the roundabout, and you say deflecting, so you've got that horizontal deflection. What would that influence? Exposure, likelihood, or severity?
Severity.
Yes, that's right. So we'd be slowing vehicles down, improving angles, so the severity of that crash, the intersection crash, would be down. And the raised platform, exposure, likelihood, or severity?
Severity and likelihood, I'm thinking.
Yeah, severity definitely. A likelihood maybe. Usually when we get speed reduction, we get reduction in likelihood of crashes. And some people are able to argue that a roundabout will also reduce likelihood of crash as well. We generally, sort of, if you're just doing that treatment that slows vehicles at intersections, we tend to just say exposure, but certainly there's possibility for likelihood as well. So yeah, I think they're good. They're all good options in terms of that reduction in the severity of crash, which is what we want to do. Okay, that's good. Any other thoughts on this? Anything else you wanted to add?
Not that I can think of, no.
Okay, well, you've done a great job. Thank you. That's excellent. Now, I just, without knowing the area at all, I mean, I can see the issue immediately, and you've described it really well. And I think I think you've rightly identified that issue is going to appear at multiple locations on any sort of grid system. I dare say this one would have a similar one that way. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, they're prolific in Invercargill. Let's just put it that way.
Yep. And I think that some high level consolidation of access. I mean, the absolute freedom of access everywhere, I think, is a luxury we don't need to provide. People can, go around a block to get into places. So I think, but you're right in the sense that sort of needs to be thought out at a network level.
And a political level.
And a political level. It's amazing, isn't it? I was doing some similar sort of planning work around in a small, well, not small, medium-sized township, Warrnambool, and they were demanding, we were wanting to close a series of intersections, and people would have to maybe go an extra couple of 100 meters to get into their house, and they were demanding people of Warrnambool, they just won't accept that, and they just don't change. They won't change. And then COVID hit, and of course, now they were working from home, and they changed and they adapted. And anyway, but I agree with you. You've got all those challenges to work with. The roundabouts, I think, are a really nice option in these scenarios. You actually do, like, well, some people will say you don't have much space there. I think you actually do have enough space to get in some small roundabouts. And I might actually show a couple of examples. I might need Kathy to hold fort while I dig up an example. Because
I think question on the roundabout, is the roundabout for cyclists? How does that improve safety in that realm as well?
Yeah, so not necessarily, but there are ways that you can sort of, depending on how much you want to spend, there are ways to make them safer for cyclists. But the whole point of it will be getting vehicle speeds down significantly, and then a couple of little tweaks on the roundabout design, and I think you'd be able to get cyclists through there pretty safely. there's
Cool.
there's expensive ways to do it, but there's some cheaper ways to do it.
Cheap is good.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just gonna snip this actually, because now, Kathy, you still there?
Yeah, certainly am. And what are you doing there, Ken? Are you going to draw over that, are you?
I am.
I'll put together another presentation while we're at it.
Yeah,
This
a couple of
is
things.
watching work. Okay, so we've had some good participation there from everyone, which has been great. And Chris has shared an engineering New Zealand presentation on what happened when they tried closing roads in Auckland as part of a local area traffic management. And if you don't want to watch the YouTube, he summarises by saying it didn't quite work. Closing, yes, but don't jump on the YouTube just yet, or unless you want me to hold fort by sending everyone to YouTube for the moment.
No. I'm 10 seconds away from where I want to be.
All right, lovely. We do have another volunteer who wants to present their intersection as well. Do we have time for that?
Not really. Well, I just want to cover this off.
Okay.
I'm not sure how I do this. Yeah, okay. Sorry,
No, you're good. You're good.
Going live into solving intersection issues.
There's lots of them.
So I don't know. It did remind me a bit of this intersection. I mean, this does have cyclists quite a lot, but didn't have actual cycle facilities, which is slightly different. They had built some curb out stands at one point, and it's a bit more of a built up area. But in terms of intersection size, not that different. And then this one, they went with the compact. So it's a compact implant roundabout. So really didn't do much apart from put the roundabout in. You can even see on the roundabout the fact that it's mountable. So if a larger vehicle does come through there, it can go over it. But you see there that they've got the speed cushions on the approach. And so so that's it there. Now, a little tweak, I think, on yours would be associated with the placement of these speed type cushions or speed calming devices. And if I jump back to that slide there, you just be thinking about where you pop those for your cyclists. So if you were to have your small roundabout and you could build some sort of splitter island, something through there, it could be very narrow. You could be putting a speed calming device back here, but then having that as the point for the cyclist to claim the lane. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yep. And you sort of arrow that in and with sharrows. So I think that would be quite a nice treatment. That would have pretty great alignment with safe system principles. It's the kind of area where you would assume that any kids riding to school at a certain age would be on the footpaths, I would imagine. And then if they're older and more confident cyclists, they'd be in the cycle lane. But yeah, anyway, I feel that might be a nice treatment. Now, that one that I was showing you from Mildura was done for about $40,000 because it was just cut in and implanted in rather than and with some spike down stuff rather than a major civil engineering exercise, which is pretty attractive considering people would be these things can cost $500,000 plus in these areas usually. So, okay.
That's awesome. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you. Thanks for volunteering. And yeah, interesting site.
Then there's another question that came in about, is there any guidance or case studies on the management of a grid network to improve on a network-wide level?
Yeah, so there's an Austroads document called Safe System in the Planning Realm or something like that. No, I don't know if realm's the right word. Safe System for Planners or something like that. And that has a bit around that sort of philosophy. It's not rocket science and groundbreaking stuff, but it certainly does talk to that from a greenfield perspective, but also brownfield perspective. Yeah, I mean, it is a challenge politically very often because of exactly that. You know, people want immediate, direct, straight access to their house, and that's what it is. Yeah, so we need to, I suppose, balance that out. Okay, what do you reckon, Kathy? Do we want to do another one quickly?
Well, it'll have to be quick. Can we speed through it?
Okay.
Say
goodbye to Leslie. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you, Leslie. And
prize for Leslie, by the way.
Sorry.
Prize for Leslie.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, prize for Leslie, and prize for anyone who. So, Anbu Salvan.
Yeah. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. You can call me Anbu.
Anbu. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Now, I think I've shared the link with Ken. I've jumped into your assignment and shared the link with Ken. Did that come through okay on your end?
Yep.
Yep. Great.
I think I'm in the right one. I'm just going to share my screen and we'll find out.
Upper Hutt, Seddon Street and Goodshed Road.
Oh, this one. It is a roundabout. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. That is a roundabout.
Oh, it's a little roundabout too. Oh, interesting one.
Yeah. So the background is this is close to, if you see north, there is a train crossing, like railway crossing.
Yep. Where's that? Oh, just here. Sorry, just here. Yeah.
Yeah. Then you have train station close by, and the south of Blenheim Street is where brewery. So it's brew town, and like there is like 5 to 10 breweries in there, and you have all the activities. And there is Sunday vegetable market, yeah, Upper Hutt Sunday market. So it's a busy pedestrian area. So when people drink, what we are encouraging is they shouldn't drive. So they walk to the train station close by, which is Upper Hutt train station. So this is a busy pedestrian route. But if you look at the roundabout,
yeah.
So there isn't much deflection for most of the legs.
Yeah.
And there is some sightline issue as well. On top of that, the railway crossing is busy, like there is trains running every 10 minutes. So when there is a queue on the left-hand lane from Seddon Street turning left to Blenheim on the west.
Here.
No, on the west, so on the west side.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Over here.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so that's the only pedestrian crossing for this intersection.
Yeah.
So this is 2 lanes. So when cars are waiting to turn left, because whenever the railway crossing is closed, so cars will be queuing on Seddon Street because this is the primary route, like busy route.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and the straight through deflection isn't much either. And so pedestrians, whenever they wanted to cross, they feel a bit nervous because when we have 2 lanes of traffic, so there is some sightline issue for pedestrians.
Right.
Yeah, and there was one fatal crash in 2019 as well.
Of a pedestrian?
No, that's with the vehicle. So the vehicle coming from north, like Good Shed Road towards Seddon Street.
Mm.
They didn't notice the left turning vehicle from Blenheim turning left to Seddon. And so they got panicked and they went into this lane, which is the north facing lane. And then they hit the car on the left turning lane. And then that was a fatal crash.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, and yeah, it's a busy intersection.
Yep.
And sometimes I feel there is less deflection. If you see all the legs, there is very, very less deflection, except this right turn from Blenheim to Seddon Street.
Yeah.
And the other issue is like pedestrians. So that's the exposure. Like pedestrians are exposed everywhere. Like there is no pedestrian crossing.
Yep.
There is only one. But even then, that's if you see the vegetation around the pedestrian crossing there, it's like.
Yep.
Yeah. So. And even the angle of the pedestrian crossing isn't right either. It's like going in an angle. It's not straight.
Yep. Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
The exposure is more pedestrians, and then because they are drunk, that's the other issue. Because we have brewery and they're walking to the train station, they are all over. So they don't sometimes use the pedestrian crossing. I live close by, and whenever I drive, I feel they just walk all over. And that's why, and we have the railway crossing close by. So they have fence as well because they don't want people to be crossing all over. So they have installed fence just to stop people.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think you've done well in describing the issues here. Certainly, the exposure is the number of pedestrians, the number of cyclists using the area, the number of vehicles using the area. The fact that they're drunk, or that they're coming from drinking establishments and the like, that we would factor in a safe system assessment into the likelihood of crashes. And so, I mean, that's part of us thinking holistically about the safe system and thinking, well, we'd like them not to be wandering around the roads drunk, but they are, and we can, get angry at that and tell them to stop, or we can think about how we reorientate our system.
Yeah.
And that's right. So that's a likelihood factor. I think you're good on the fact that there's low deflection, so speeds will be higher through this area. So that's a good point. I think, I mean, the roundabout to its credit is doing something at the moment in slowing vehicles down. Everybody's having to give way. If one of these was a sort of priority leg, I think we would be probably in a worse position from the speeds and the like, but we can certainly, I can see the issues there. Severity then is influenced by the speeds of those vehicles. We've probably got another likelihood factor, as you pointed out, associated with queuing and looking at how vehicles queue over here and some issues there with multiple lanes and the like. In terms of then, what did you think that we could possibly do to alter this to improve safety?
Oh, I think maybe racing all the leg, maybe having some more pedestrian crossing and slowing them down.
Yeah.
Because the Good Shed Road to Seddon Street, if you see the street here, it's like straight through. So people never slow down. And Blenheim Street is like just for brewery. So it's not a busy route for vehicles, but it's a busy pedestrian route. So obviously people think that there is no cars, so they just go straight through. Yeah, it's just, so pedestrian, maybe a few more pedestrian crossings and then racing them just to slow all the vehicles down. And create a bit more deflection and probably vegetation as well, because the vegetation is bad close to the crossing.
So you want to
maybe
trim that or remove it?
Yes, maybe remove it. Because if a kid is running, the kid might think that it's a pedestrian crossing and they get priority, but the vehicle may not see the kid due to the vegetation.
Okay, I think that's a really good point. So that would reduce the likelihood of crashes. So I think your ideas are really good there. I mean, I'm with you in terms of thinking how do we slow vehicles on the approach to this? I think the roundabout, I think increasing deflection on that roundabout may come with other challenges around getting large vehicles on a skewed intersection like this. You might have some significant issues. And so the roundabout in its own right, to me, really just acts as a control, like traffic management device. So ensuring that people are flowing through. So we're back to sort of thinking about how we get speeds down and that connectivity. So raised intersections would provide a really beneficial thing there. The challenge you may have with the rail crossing there, if you have a raised crossing across this leg, may be a queuing issue over the
Crossing.
rail crossing. So that one might have to be thought about carefully, and whether or not it's other legs get that, or some modeling's done to determine that. Because then the other option would be to signalise, and signalise potentially leaving the roundabout if you wanted. There's no need to really get rid of the roundabout in that sense. So it could be a sort of signalised roundabout, which would perform pretty well. Obviously, a lot more expensive, but in the short term, some raising this crossing point, as you say, a little bit of tweaking around with some bits and pieces there, and having potentially a raised crossing on this side as well, and maybe even somewhere here, that would significantly improve the safety, the connectivity of this area. And that would be addressing the severity of crashes, and would also influence the likelihood of crashes as well.
Yeah, thank you. And so one more question. So if we signalize, because Upper Head is like a small town, it's close to Wellington, which is a small town, so we don't have much signals at all. So it's roundabout everywhere. So is that out of context for a signal, like somewhere random? I just want to.
Yeah, no, it's a fair question. I certainly had similar debates for an area I was managing, Phillip Island, and they were very proud to say there were no signals on the island, and lots of roundabouts and lots of people, but we put signals in and it performs fine, and that seems to be the case. It's more than just is that sort of the look and feel you want for the area, and there's costs associated with it. The key though is to not get into that mindset mentality of removing your speed calming devices to put traffic signals. So if signals are going in, they're just there as that traffic control device, but we still need to manage those speeds. The severity needs to be down through those. So that's why I wanted to sort of retain that roundabout, or you can make it raised signal.
Yeah, thank you.
Good.
And thanks for listening to me.
Oh no, thank you. Thanks for volunteering. Interesting site. I'm kind of keen to go there on a Sunday afternoon, actually.
I think
that's fantastic.
I think everyone's wanting to go to Brewtown now as well. So thank you. They were great examples, both of those, and very good. Yeah, and well, actually, I'll share my slides now, Kathy, and I'll do a little bit, and then we'll have a stretch break. But I think it's always worthwhile sort of talking through those sites from that live perspective. The assignments are a good one because they're usually areas people know, just like that one we saw there from Upper Hutt. I mean, it's a systematic way to think through risk, exposure, likelihood, and severity. And having a flick through the assignments, and haven't marked them yet, but I just did have a flick through. I think generally people were actually pretty good at, pretty good at recording. People were pretty good at likelihood. Generally got their head around what's influencing the likelihood of crashes, see-through effects, sight distance, impediments, the geometry of the road, lighting or no lighting, signs, line marking, all of these things.
Severity, again, people are pretty good at that. And speed came up a lot. And that's absolutely right, because it's such a determiner of severity of crashes. Speeds, angles, vulnerability of users. Exposure is a little bit of a harder one. People still a little bit confused on that. And that's understandable because it's a bit of a weird way to think about things. It's like when we get to the next phase, where we're actually sort of documenting a safe system assessment, it actually becomes a little bit easier to do exposure. But we wanted to inch you into it. But let me give you an example here. Got a road, and we've got pedestrians crossing this road. Oh, they can be crossing from both directions. And we've got vehicles. So the number of vehicles, the number of pedestrians, that's our exposure, okay? That's how many people are exposed to crashes. The distance that they cross, the pedestrians cross, right? That we attribute in a safe system assessment the likelihood. There was a bit of debate around this, and it was one of the things that there's a supplementary bit of guidance about, because it was, yeah, as I say, it was debated. We put that to likelihood. That, I suppose, traditionally in a road safety analysis would have been talked about as sort of exposure time, the time you're exposed to a crash. So if we were to do something like a curb outstand or a curb build out, as you call it, okay, and just reduce the crossing distance, that just influences the likelihood of crash. Okay, because you've still got the same number of pedestrians crossing, you've got the same number of vehicles, so exposure is still the same. If we were then to put a zebra crossing across there, so a pedestrian crossing across there, that still only influences the likelihood, okay? Now they've got less distance to cross, they've got control, right? It may influence the likelihood of crash. It's probably not going to do a great job of, well, it will reduce the likelihood to a degree. If, though, we were to raise this up, okay, if we made this a raised pedestrian crossing, then we're into reducing the severity of crashes and the likelihood of crashes. We still haven't changed exposure, because exposure is the number, right? If there's some, major latent demand going on, and, you build this and a whole lot more people come and cross there, okay, then we've probably upped exposure. But yeah, you need some actual tangible sort of modeling or predictions for that. So hopefully that helps explain it a little bit. I think there's still a little bit of confusion on that. I think after next session, people will have that pretty clear. We talked about exposure I think at the end of the first module about, okay, blocking off roads and blocking off intersections and the like, influencing exposure, because that changes the number of people that are exposed, or that full complete separation. They're the sort of exposure factors. And there is a bit of definition which we'll get a little bit more into, which says here, refers to now, yeah, so this is an interesting one. This refers to what road users in what numbers, and I'm going to cross that out, and are using the road and thus exposed to crashes. The measure include AADT, side road traffic volumes, number of motorcyclists, number of cyclists, pedestrians crossing or walking along the road. The reason I cross that out is that we've got some supplementary guidance in a series of fact sheets and a couple of jurisdictions that have produced their supplements that have shown why that's not appropriate to use for how long. because you end up double counting risk. So we've produced a series of safe system scoring fact sheets. So the one on, well, each of these sort of delves into some of that categorization. This one, for example, is, how do you look at bike treatments in exposure, likelihood, and severity? So a bike lane, what does that influence? Well, that influences likelihood. Well, what about if it's a bike lane with a hatched area, between that and the traffic lane? Well, it's still likelihood, it's just less likelihood. What about if that was a concrete separator? What about if that was a physical barrier separation? What about if that distance of the hatched area was 20 meters? We start to unpack some of those questions about how you attribute your risk reduction. So those are all, there's a link to those in the learning management system, so they may be helpful as you continue to go forward. How are we going on time here, Kathy? Should I get started? Yeah, I'll get started a bit on this.
Yeah, just a couple of, apart from AADT, side road traffic, do we also consider the percentage of heavy vehicles? Where does that go? So
percentage of heavy vehicles you tend to put into the severity of crash, and sort of holistically looking at, well, if these crashes happen, there's more chance that the heavy vehicle might be involved. And so there's more mass, and thus there's more severity of incident. So that's generally how it's accounted for. If you start to get into significant, you've got areas that are absolutely dominated freight areas, you may decide to use freight as their own specific category, like large vehicles as their own specific category. That's a very rare thing to do in a safe system assessment, but it can be done. The other thing that you think about is the percentage of large vehicles may influence the likelihood of pedestrian and cyclist crashes due to some of those risk factors we know of pedestrians and cyclists around large vehicles being sort of caught in swept path areas or harder to see in different spots where they store and the like. So that's sort of how they end up getting factored into a safe system assessment. Anything else, Kathy?
No, we're good. Thank you.
Okay, so this module, we're going to talk about connecting the One Network framework, movement and place thinking with safe system thinking. And then using that, we'll talk about vulnerable road users, being pedestrian, cyclists, motorcyclists, and how we understand what things align highly or don't align highly with safe system principles. And of course, we'll be taking those and always talking about exposure, likelihood, and severity as you're now really starting to think about things. Okay, so One Network framework, movement and place. Now, some of you will be very familiar with this and will be very comfortable with all this. This might be new to some of you, but I'll give a very short explanation of it, and then I'll explain why we're interested in this when we're just looking at safe system alignment. So the idea between sort of One Network frameworks and movement and place is that our roads and streets provide some different functions. Okay, so, and you can see on the axes here, we've got movement and we've got place. And it just happens we've got a rural and an urban one for New Zealand. And I'll concentrate probably more on the urban one, but let's talk about this. So movement, you've got to think about as the movement of people and goods. Don't think about it as movement of cars. That's an important starting point. Movement of people and goods in whatever form we are moving. Hey, it could be cars, could be bikes, could be public transport. Whatever it is, it's about moving people and goods through a street, a road, an area. Then we've got place value, right? The place value is the ability to trade, to interact, to socialize, to meet people. It's to congregate. That's place value. I think there's like 10 factors that people use to attribute a value of place, but I can't remember sort of all of them. But those are the general things. So what this has done is identified that our streets and roads, well, maybe when they first originated, they were all about movement of people and goods, but they have become places important to our community and our society. And so what we do is then categorize streets and roads into their movement and place categorization. And so you can see simple things like a transit corridor. That is all about movement. There is no desire to have place value there. These can be, cycleways or motorways or train lines. Like these are not areas you want people hanging out, having a coffee, catching up with friends, shopping and the like. They're all about movement of people and goods through there. Down the other end, we've got these civic spaces, and they're the opposite. It's all about trying to have these streets and areas that are dominated by that place to hang out and have a coffee and buy a new pair of pants and all of that sort of wonderful stuff. Have a public gathering, meeting, whatever it is. And it's not about moving people or goods through those areas. And then you start to be able to sort of categorize here. And New Zealand's gone with these urban connectors, city hubs, main streets, activity streets, local streets, civic spaces as the labels for them for the urban area. But, others have used other names, and I don't get too caught up on that. Why on earth do we care about this in a safe system assessment? Well, the reason we care about this is not because it changes our assessment as such. It changes what we would recommend, because we can create a very highly aligned safe system environment up here in a transit corridor. But it is not going to be it's not going to have place value, right? It's going to be, continuous barrier systems of some sort. It's going to be stopping pedestrians crossing or getting into these areas, and it won't be a nice place to hang out. Likewise, we can give you a very highly aligned safe system road or street down here, but it's not going to move people and goods through it fast, right? But the thing is that they both can align very well with safe system principles. And so we sort of tailor our treatments based on where they sit within these categorizations. Hope that makes sense. So let's sort of, we've got these civic spaces. And it was interesting with the pop-up infrastructure and tactical urbanism and those sort of things that really took off around COVID. We saw a lot of sort of areas that managed to sort of be dragged into here, and it was quite interesting. But I want to do a couple of little exercises with you, and it might be this one is a good one to mix with our little break, I think. What I want you to do is have a look at this area, and we're going to say, right, this has been defined right down here as a civic space. So the strategic planners have said, yep, we've looked at our network, we've decided this is a civic space here, and we want to make some changes. Now, I want you to recommend changes to this area to A, improve alignment with safe system principles, and B, enhance its civic space characteristics. Okay, but it doesn't end there. Everything you suggest, I want you to either put an E, because it means you're changing exposure, an L, or an S just after it. So I don't know, you might say improve the lighting, L. Now again, why would you say improve the lighting? That would be an odd thing to do. Oh, maybe not. Civic space, maybe you want it to be nicely lit at night so people can hang out, have a drink, and it's a nice area. Maybe, I don't know. But that's going to be a task. So we're going to give you 4 minutes. Kathy, is that enough?
Yeah, sounds good.
4 minutes, and you're going to pop a few of those in, but also go and I'll give you 5 minutes. Do that, have a stretch, fill up your water or coffee or whatever you're having. But pop in some ideas, things that you want to change in this environment that would improve safe system alignment, would make it more of that civic space, and categorize it into exposure, likelihood, or severity.
Any limitations, Ken? No.
No.
Okay. So you know, no budget, no nothing.
No.
Go for your life.
It's just thinking about what is the civic space look like, and what's exposure, likelihood, and severity.
Great.
Oh, I'm seeing some really good answers here coming in, and most people doing a good job in putting exposure, likelihood, and severity in. So thank you. I'm just going to go through. And talk to a few of them. I won't be able to get to everybody's, but I do like what I'm seeing here. So immediately we had some people straight off the bat saying, well, hang on a second. Why do we need cars in here? And I think that's a wonderful starting point. If you get it if you've got anything that you can convince or that a strategic planner or somebody's told you is a civic space, that is a great question to ask. And so Chris, I think we'll give Chris a prize definitely for that. First one, straight in, just allowing maybe public transport and service vehicles, and rightly identifying that it is altering the exposure to crashes, less vehicles through there. And Lauren, there are in just about the same time putting the same in, so we'll prize us both there. So then we've got quite a few people came in with similar things around that, and yeah, it is a really great starting point. As there becomes, I suppose, more of a movement requirement for some of that, for some different vehicles, that's where you introduce your public transport comes in, potentially cyclists and cars potentially as well. So I really like that, and well done. We then had some people talking about creation of wider footpaths and the like, and that certainly does increase your place value, gives more area for that catching up, socializing, trading, and the like. It reduces the likelihood of crashes as well. Okay, remember, unless we have, well, I suppose unless we have some traffic modeling or the like that shows us that it's going to reduce the number of vehicles through there as well, we just keep it at likelihood. So parking is an interesting one, and removal of parking. So that opens up sight lines to pedestrians crossing. So that does reduce the likelihood of crashes. However, you always need to be careful with removal of parking that it doesn't open up the carriageway to a wider, faster, higher speed carriageway. So if you remove parking, use that space wisely with narrowing treatments. And you've got wonderful space there that you can have dedicated cycle facilities or build your footpath out or the like. Then we got into some people talking about, where was the one I was looking at? Kathy, you might have to get involved here in terms of finding who the first person to say shared zone was. Rudapana, I think maybe. So the idea of a shared zone, and nicely put there that it reduces likelihood and severity. So that idea that, okay, it is going to be a very, we can have vehicles go through there, but if they do, they'll go very, very slow and they'll give way to any pedestrian crossing in that whole area. So that becomes our next sort of one there to think about. Because as a number of other people have put in, these raised crossing points, which are really well aligned with safe system principles. So thumbs up on that and reduce the likelihood and severity of crashes. They do tend to, from a transport planning perspective, say that that is a road for cars and pedestrians, you can cross in that little bit, right? So you've immediately sort of pushed it kind of out of civic space. You've, by those formalized specific only crossing points, if that makes sense. So, but as I say, you've got to decide exactly where it fits within this and make those calls. So I think some really comprehensive ones coming in down later there. So Jess has sort of summed up pretty much everything I've said. Has some speed limit reductions for likelihood and severity, raised every crossing. So I think Jess can have a prize definitely for comprehensiveness, as can, I can't see the full name here, Kathy, so you're going to have to have a look at that. Stuff with the JUB, that's all I can see. The two very comprehensive ones that covered off everything. Oh, they keep getting better. Yeah, Nick can have a prize as well. Again, comprehensive. Covered it all off as Glenn did. Oh, I better stop, Kathy. I'll give away all your prizes. So I hope you got those. Thank you, everybody. That was really, really good. And it's just thinking about those spaces. And so here's sort of again, an artistic impression of it. You don't want to, take too much out of artistic impressions. And in fact, this one, I wouldn't have the pedestrian crossing. I just have this all as a shared zone. You can see there, obviously much more of a place to hang out and play and the like, have a coffee. It's better aligned with safe system principles. Crashes are less likely. There's going to be less severity of any incidents do occur. We probably will have lower exposure because there's just limited ability for vehicles to get through there in numbers. As then the prior, the movement requirement of vehicles and people and goods goes up, you start to then create these separated areas for different vehicle modes, and bicyclists getting their own way, and public transport, and potentially cars as well, and some more formalized crossing spots. But that's because the movement requirement through there has gone up. Okay. So when we talk about then local streets, I mean, we're still not saying that these are movement, major movement corridors. Their place value has gone down. These don't have high place value. Now, you don't obviously tell the residents, the house owners that they think that there's lots of place value to their street, but we're thinking about that from that societal place value metric. And these these areas, where we end up is sort of saying, well, we're going to be able to lower speeds to block access. We talked about that one in Lower Hutt there. You know, it, sorry, no, it wasn't Lower Hutt, it was in Invercargill, it's the grid network there. I mean, because we don't define it as these major movement corridors, I mean, we're talking major movement corridors, we're talking big, it's a long sort of getting people from the major corridor to travel. Yeah, we don't quite have as much of that. It's for access to houses and maybe shorter commute route through, which gives us the ability to, or it should give us the license to be closing off different access points and rearranging our whole way of operating those areas. But nonetheless, speeds can be significantly brought down, and we know there are simple ways to do that with local area traffic management features and the like. And so an artistic impression on this one in that sort of local street environment, again, you know, seeing that speeds come significantly down, they're not able to be used as major through corridors. And this one's probably more built up than we would be expecting. We might jump on now to do this sort of tricky environment of where we have high place value and we have high movement. And high movement and high place, which gives us this challenge. Before I jump into that, Kathy, anything coming in there that I need to do? No, it's just you telling everybody I'm giving prizes away. Okay, so let's do a little one on main streets. Okay, so say this area has been identified as that category of main streets, and it's got that high place, high movement. You see here, it's a 70K environment currently, and it's got lots of car lanes, and it's got pedestrian overpass, got people crossing and riding along it. It's got shops and bars and cafes on the sides there. Let's do the same little exercise. I'll only give you maybe 3 minutes on this one, but I want you to jot in there, what are you going to change about this one? Recognizing it, we want it to move to that main streets category, but we want to also improve safe system alignment and categorize them into exposure likelihoods and severity. Okay, Kathy. I might get into this. But again, seeing wonderful answers. This group's excellent and really nicely getting their head around exposure likelihood and severity. So that's making me happy because that will be very, very useful for next the next session and the big assignment for this course. But also I like the way they're starting to really now piece together which treatments align with which parts of this sort of movement in place categorization. So we see there immediately people talking about the speed of travel and the speed needing to come down, the speed limit, speed of passenger vehicles. And that's absolutely right. So yes, there is a movement requirement because it's got that, but there's a place requirement too. And so that 70 kilometers per hour is highly unaligned with safe system principles, with the pedestrians and cyclists in the area. It's not going to add place value. It'll detract from the place value with these speed of vehicles. And so there's absolutely that ability to lower that speed. So then we've got lots of people talking about reorientation of the lane space and utilizing some of that big amount of traffic lanes for cycleways and increasing footpath widths and the like. And those again are great things because they're going to increase the place value of it. And so really, yeah, enjoying that. Now Rachel's said get rid of the overbridge or the pedestrian overpass there. And I think a prize there for Rachel, Kathy, because it's a really interesting one. The alignment with safe system principles theoretically is high, okay? Because we've removed the exposure to crashes for pedestrians. However, from the safe system perspective, from a movement and place perspective, it is an absolute beacon to say that this is a traffic route, and pedestrians, you got to go over, way and up and over and back there. And so, first of all, as Rachel was rightly pointed out, people aren't going to use it; they just will walk across the road. And you can see it in the thing. So we've got that issue. If we just absolutely force people to use it, well, then you've eroded place value significantly of the area. And yes, there's significant accessibility issues with this one in particular as well. So yeah, in anywhere that has high place value, you wouldn't expect to see pedestrian overpasses. In high movement, low place values, yeah, that's when we're going to expect to see them. So I'm just skipping through a lot of these wonderful things.
I'll just highlight some left of field.
Yeah.
Build a dog park, less people walking dogs in town. It's because if you
Like it.
And it says unlimited funds, a tunnel for the traffic.
Sure.
And retain the surface for pedestrian cyclists.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't give any fun limitations. One that I'm probably not as keen on, again, not because it doesn't align with safe system principles, but, you know, really fencing the area off from pedestrians crossing. That, you know, again, it will likely reduce death and serious injury. I say likely because it depends exactly how you do it. Sometimes if you do it badly, pedestrians walk along the road on the other side of the fence you've put up until they get to the gap they want. So there's actually a worse scenario, but you could do it. But again, it really just says this is a traffic route and or a movement corridor, and there's no place value to this area. Or very little place value. there's some really good Okay. Lots of good stuff there. Sorry, I'm not going to get time to go through them all. Let's see what the sort of artistic impression alters to. Now, very nice. Look, you can immediately see it's got more place value. And it's got movement through there. Lots of movement of cyclists, lots of movement of public transport and passenger vehicles, some movement. Now, these are sort of, holistic transport planning, transformations of areas and transport modes and those sort of things. And it's often very hard for us in a, day-to-day project perspective on a road or an area to, transform areas like this. And obviously, if everybody's still trying to drive their car through this area, it's going to be a very slow journey for them. So their movement may not, but it may shift their mode to more sustainable transports, where that's, bigger than, I suppose, the safe system assessment component of it. The assessment is just looking at, well, what is going to influence death and serious injury? And then when we recommend stuff, can we recommend things that align with this movement and place categorization? So pretty nice little diagram there. But I suppose we see similar stuff sort of coming in different areas. And, here's Christchurch example, and you've got those areas where we're still providing those movement functions for vehicles to get through, and cyclists and pedestrians getting through there. And it's increasing place value by not having it as multi-lane car traffic at speed through these areas. And thinking about how we manage these intersections in these environments is interesting. I think I just wanted to flag the idea of protected intersections becoming more and more commonplace. That's the protected signalised intersection for bikes, where they've got the island, sort of Dutch-inspired style intersection. So we're seeing more and more of that, which sort of connects in nicely with some of these sorts of areas within the movement and place framework. When we are in these more urban connectors, this is where we are starting to see more of those things to restrict that permeation of pedestrians across the whole area, any things for people sort of hanging out and having coffees and catching up with people and trading in these specific areas. And so we will see more of these dedicated cycleways or dedicated traffic routes and looking at things like overpasses and underpasses and those sorts of facilities. Even within these categories, though, we want to think about slowing vehicles down at these conflict points and these interaction points, be that the signalised intersections that are provided or any dedicated crossing points. We'd be wanting to slow vehicles down still. When we talk about pedestrians and cyclists, I mean, we are talking about our most vulnerable road users and severe injury risk. About 10% at that 20 kilometres per hour. 30 is the value or the kilometre per hour figure put on for that sort of 10% death. But if you think about serious injury as well, it comes down a little bit from that. Of course, the young and old, even more vulnerable for slightly different reasons, but more vulnerable. And so really we were trying to manage these speeds to around that 20 kilometres per hour where there's that pedestrian volume crossing or interacting, or we're trying to separate. So the separation for our vulnerable road users, we can do in many forms. We've got footpaths, sidewalks and the like. We're seeing a lot more of the Copenhagen style bike lanes. I showed that Christchurch example and the like. We know these have that really good alignment with safe system principles because we've either eliminated exposure to crashes or significantly reduced the likelihood, if we're still concerned with vehicles entering here, either into side roads, into property access points or the like, or there's not enough separation or it's mountable separation that you're still concerned with, but it still brings down the likelihood significantly. And we talked about roundabouts sort of influencing the likelihood or more the severity of crashes, and they do well. And then the pedestrians and cyclists, we need to just be a little bit sort of careful about how we do it. And best practice for these areas are these sort of, again, Dutch style protected roundabouts, where we see the facilities, priority facilities for pedestrians and cyclists around the roundabout and raised crossing treatments. So there is, significant cost associated with these, and so it can be a challenge if you've got an area like that in Invercargill 1 to spend this much money, and they take up a bit more land, but the principles are really sound, and they're quite good in the sense that this provides great reduction in likelihood and severity for pedestrians, cyclists, and passenger vehicles. So there's that one, Bill. And you can see there that, well, if I go back, a cyclist, to turn right from down here, sort of will come in and goes in and around and travels off down that way and connects back in. And yeah, we did a study on this. We put the cameras out, and sort of around 85, a little bit higher than that % of cyclists actually use that facility, as opposed to just continuing on to the main way. So that's pretty impressive. Vehicles are slowing. People get very concerned about vehicles sort of queuing over the things. Most vehicles, tend to prop there, and then the other one props back here, so it works quite well. And then they go. Does it impact on vehicle traffic flow? Yeah, it does a little bit. The local government responsible for this area, very much okay with that, and they, respond politely to residents to say this is a priority area for cyclists and pedestrians, and if possible, we encourage you to walk or ride to your destination, and it might take a little bit longer if you have to be in a car. And yeah, that's their answer. So it works really quite nicely and has wonderful alignment with safe system principles. Jump in with questions, Kathy. I'm sure people have questions about this.
There's a comment about it's great at getting more people cycling.
Yeah.
And congestion is good at making people not want to drive there. There is a comment, and I'm not sure, significant costs plus traffic congestion within mostly CBD areas. I'm not sure, I might need some more information on that one.
Yeah, I mean, this is where we sort of dipping in and out of what is sort of road safety, what is holistic transport planning, climate change, all of these things, and they're all defined in all these different ways.
Just on the previous, sorry,
yeah.
I cut you off. Did you want to keep going?
No. I was going
you're going to go on a rant. Okay, good. Why did the sign on the previous line say 10 cyclists? I don't know if it was a speed give way to cyclists. That one.
I think they might be reading that 2 cyclists.
Oh, two. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a little bit small. Yeah. So this was a little. I mean, it's a weird little bit of the legislation that you're not meant to ride a bike over a pedestrian crossing, so you have to create a pedestrian crossing and a priority cyclist. So you have to give way for the cyclist and 2 cyclists. It's just a road rules mess, and it's all a little bit ridiculous in my mind, but anyway, it is what it is. Okay, two-lane roundabouts hard, and you can take similar theory and when you've got these one-lane crossing points, but when we get to these sorts of crossing points, well, the Dutch would simply just go under in these situations if that road's got enough traffic priority, freight priority, then go under for cyclists. These sorts of designs reduce the likelihood of crashes just because they give it that sort of nice staggered crossing for cyclists. But I mean, going under and removing the exposure to that crash would be the way to go. A little bit of a diagram, I mean, adapted off a Dutch diagram, but in these lower speed environments, the lane sharing is okay. And then when we're above about that 30 kilometers per hour, we really need to separate physically vehicles and cyclists, and physical separation in one way or another can use the parking to be associated with that. And then in the very high speed environment, 70 kilometers per hour up, well, a fully separated off-road path is the go. And these are the areas where I would say we start banning cyclists from the road. People get a little bit annoyed at me sometimes when I go down that track. I'm an avid cyclist, but I say that we can't have every road doing every function. And if we've provided that off-road facility, we're going to have to start to say, well, okay, we don't let cars go on the shared paths, so we won't let the bikes go on that bit of road. And anyway, happy to chat to people about that. Okay, let's talk briefly about pedestrians now, and I don't have too much on this, and I talked about them being the most vulnerable sort of road users we've got. The idea of a raised pedestrian crossing, I call it a wombat crossing, but not termed a wombat crossing in New Zealand. This is so well aligned with safe system principles. Okay, if you do just a zebra crossing, so an at-grade pedestrian crossing, we know it doesn't provide much, if any, road safety value. Sometimes it actually makes things worse. Then why is that? Well, it doesn't address the severity of crashes. Sometimes it increases the likelihood of crashes a little bit. Sometimes it decreases it. So that's all right. But pedestrians crossing more confidently, they have priority, they cross, but vehicles approaching with no physical reason to, slow down, no vertical deflection or the like, they're going at higher speed, so the severity of incidents when they occur. So really, if we're providing pedestrian priority, you really should be slowing vehicles. And raised crossings are, what we consider best practice because of a whole lot of reasons. The fact that it slows vehicles on the approach to the crossing point. They slow down before they go over it. They don't hit it and slow down. They slow down because they can see it like a speed hump, and they navigate over it. It raises up the crossing so that pedestrians crossing are in a visual line. People can see them. You don't need to have multiple impacts on the vehicles. So people often say, well, why don't you just do a speed hump on the approach to the crossing? Yeah, well, you need two of those and you haven't elevated. There's a whole lot of accessibility advantages and a whole lot of other wonderful advantages associated with these raised crossings. So they just tick so many boxes in alignment with safe system principles, good transport planning and everything. And this is an interesting little case study or example that I like to highlight. I mean, we have known and we do know sort of intuitively what a very well aligned safe system area is for pedestrians. And this is a construction site. This was quite a while back in Adelaide. So this road here was 60 kilometres per hour. And because there were some workers doing work in the island here, electrical works down and doing some bits and pieces, they reduced the speed limit to 25 kilometres per hour, which is South Australia's work zone speed limit. They put in the barrier systems to protect the workers. And they did their work for a couple of weeks. And then they packed everything up. Speed limit went back up to 60 and all the barriers were removed. And then sort of, I don't know, about 3,000 pedestrians stand in this area every day. So we are providing this safe system environment for the workers. But the general public don't get afforded that same level of safety. And some people will say, well, the workers, they're concentrating on their work. And I'd say, well, the pedestrians are concentrating on their phone, or they're intoxicated, or, so that's, I don't think that counts. We know what a safe system environment is. And if you ever have to sort of give an elevator pitch on the safe system, say, do you know occupational health and safety, the way we think about road workers or the like, or even other work sites and the like? Well, we take that culture and philosophy of safety and afford it to the entire travelling public. That's pretty well aligned with safe system principles. Funny, it plays out like if you ever do work for a mine site, well, this is sort of in Northern Territory, Queensland areas that I've experienced sort of this. Not sure how it would play out in New Zealand, but you're driving along on these roads, they're 100 kilometres an hour, 110 kilometres an hour. And you get to the property boundary of the mine site, but I mean, some of these are, it's so massive. And you get to the gate, and then you continue on, but you've got to drive at like 50 kilometres an hour. Same road, same roadside environment, another 10 k's or whatever of road, but they say there's no possible way we'd let people drive at that speed, not on our property. So it's an interesting, just very interesting, altered take on risk. But we did some, really great features. They align well. They're good. Raising intersections, highly aligned with safe system principles. You can see here, important part of doing that is thinking about tracking of larger vehicles around the intersection. So, some sort of bollards, because you remove the curbing and the like. But we're reducing the likelihood and severity of crashes as we do that. Raised thresholds, raised crossing points, reducing the likelihood and severity of crashes. Speed limit reductions. I mean, this is just the example of where the change from the default 60 kilometre per hour to 50 in urban areas happened. And you can see, step change there in the amount of death and serious injury occurring. So highly effective. Kathy, any comments or questions before I just briefly touch motorcyclists in our last 10 minutes?
No, all good.
Okay. Great. Okay, motorcyclists. So I sort of think about these 5 S's: sight, surface, signs, strike, and speed. And so that's, can the motorcyclists see what's coming up? Can drivers see motorcyclists? Are we providing appropriate surfaces, signs to warn, inform, guide? Strike is that, when the crash is happening, what's the motorcyclist hitting or what's hitting the motorcyclist, and what's the speed there of travel? If we think about categorizing these into likelihood or severity or exposure, we see that, being able to see motorcyclists and the like, and the surface and the signs, they're all addressing the likelihood of crash. Strike is that severity, how bad is this crash going to be? And speed, well, across everything really, speed's this amazing feature because it reduces the chance of crash and the severity of crash. And within that, there's some exponential changes, as you saw with the severity curves. For motorcycle severity curves, there's been some more recent 2019 release of some research, which is quite exciting, and it gives us some extra insights. I'm not going to go into this in detail now. I've put it into your notes and the reference is there if you want to really read the big juicy report. We used to think about motorcyclists and just categorize them in with cyclists and pedestrians and say, that's just the vulnerable road user. What this research showed is that motorcyclists are they can withstand a bit more force than pedestrians and cyclists in general, but nowhere near what a passenger vehicle occupant can withstand. So very briefly, I'll just touch on each of these S's, and we'll start with sight. But the fact that motorcyclists are smaller, they are hidden behind smaller things, but that's just an increase in the likelihood of crashes. So you see there, motorcyclists coming off the front of the platoon, and the tree being enough to sort of block that sight line. So as we're factoring in likelihood of crashes, we're adding, okay, motorcyclists are going to be more likely. They're smaller, they're hidden behind more things. It could be signal controller boxes, trees, small power poles, and these sort of things. The surface we provide is very important. Motorcyclists get referred to as the canary in the coal mine when it comes to surface conditions, because they have two small contact patches and they lean to take a corner or a curve. And so, any surface deficiency and center of gravity, and the rider's in trouble. So when we're doing these assessments, we can look at surfaces and we can sort of categorize and factor in and say, well, that's going to increase the likelihood of motorcycle crashes because, this one steel plate, when it's wet, it's dark, when it's raining, it's still raining a bit, the rider's following behind a truck or a car or the like, and so doesn't see this until the last minute or the like, we know that's going to increase the chance of crash. Motorcyclists are highly attuned to warning signs and different signage we put out there. So we can warn riders in particular using these particular motorcycle warning signs, which are used in New Zealand as an option. So if you've got a specific hazard you're thinking about motorcyclists for, but just generally good signage can very much help motorcyclists in reducing the likelihood of crash, because signage is all about the likelihood of crash. And strike. So strike is this interesting one. So I'll just show you a video here of a motorcycle crash test. It's the European crash test, but it's what we would use in New Zealand for lack of a match particular motorcycle crash test or the like. So this crash test is done at 25-degree angle at 60 kilometers an hour. And so you see a motorcycle dummy into a barrier post there. And you can see that the severity of that incident is far beyond what the human body can handle at 60 kilometers an hour into the post. But if the addition of some underrun protection, so in this case, a rub rail, we see the energy sort of dissipated along the system, pushed out, some energy absorbing of the system, and that becomes within the tolerable limits of the sliding rider. So that shows us that, there are things we can do that reduce the severity of incident for motorcyclists. It's hard, but if we do think about energy management, we're still in that realm of possibility of reducing the severity of crashes. And speed, of course, well, actually, before I jump onto speed, there's often discussion about wire rope safety barrier and motorcyclists, and it's all blown way out of proportion. always. The reason, well, there's been almost, well, no, I shouldn't say. There's been only a couple of incidents of motorcycle death or serious injury with wire rope safety barrier. Yet there's been far more with other barrier systems. Like just, 100 to 1,000 to 1 in terms of the barrier types involved. The reason for that is, well, there's a lot more of other barrier systems out there, but second is that wire rope safety barrier systems, you can't put on popular motorcycle touring routes because it's a barrier system in tension. So, like if you're looking down on a road and, it's a road and it's got a curve like that, and you put a wire rope barrier system around the curve like this, and then you anchor it down here and you tension it up, well, it's just going to pop into the middle of the road. The posts will bend, it just doesn't work. So you don't do wire rope safety barriers, absolute minimum curve radius 200 for wire rope safety barrier system. So you're going to use it on your big, long, straight roads. And motorcyclists aren't sort of falling asleep and drifting off the road and overcorrecting the way passenger vehicles are. So the nature of where these barrier systems are placed is a significant factor in all of this. So yeah, it's very few. There used to be a time where you'd be absolutely fixated on wire rope safety barrier system because your choice was a W-beam system, like a G4 or a Type B system, or a wire rope system, right? And we knew that the wire rope system has a sort of, well, pretty close to a 90% reduction in death and serious injury, and a Type B or a G4 has about a 45% reduction. So you had a massive difference. But now we have these, flexible W-beam systems like your Easy Guard or your Ram Shield or Sentry Guard, and they're somewhere in the 75% reduction in death and serious injury, and they can get fitted with this beautiful underrun protection as well. So, if this became a concern, you'd just be opting for that. So anyway, speed, highly influential, and we can influence speed in, advisory speeds, regulatory speeds, local area traffic management, all of those things that you're very aware of, and they will reduce the likelihood and severity of motorcycle crashes. But, you kind of do need to be aware though, but, going from 100 down to, 80 is more going to really likely reduce the likelihood of motorcycle crashes, because a motorcycle is impacting a tree, a rock embankment, a car or anything at either of these speeds is well beyond what they can handle from a force perspective. So we'll get significant reduction in likelihood. You still need to bring it further down if you want to really get into that severity. Some of the incidents probably, the 80, they'll break a bit and they'll wash off some speed and they'll get down into reducing severity, but just bear that in mind. Okay, so Kathy, I'll just take any questions to finish off, and then we'll give people a little bit of time to themselves to finish off the quiz.
Yeah, absolutely. There are some quizzes in there. Now, Chris made a comment saying he's a St John ambulance volunteer and has been called to crashes like this with motorcyclists. The additional barriers make a huge difference. So I'm not sure which way that comment is going.
I think the underrun protection, reduces the severity of incidents. So
you're all over it with Chris. Or you saw his comment come in before I did. Anyway, terrific. It's good to hear. Any other questions?
So there's a quiz today, and anybody who hasn't finished that assignment, please jump in there, finish it off. Next session, we're going to give you the big assignment.
Yeah, that's right, Ken. And that has just reminded me that I should ask everyone to have a quick look at the spot we've given you. And it is just here. So in module 4, which is the next session, which is on Friday, we have assigned you, the assignment in there is complete your safe system assessment. So all I'm asking you to do right now is to jump in here and have a look. We have found you a site and your name is at the end of that site. So for some, there'll be 2 or more people, just because a colleague of yours, or many colleagues even, live or have a similar address nearby or work nearby. So just double check if that location is suitable for you to get out there and do a site visit sometime in the next week and a half or so. So if you've moved 300 kilometres away, or for some other reason you're not able to get to the site that we have assigned for you, then please send me an email and let me know, and we'll conjure up a new one for you. So that is in module 4. And it's in this section here, but you don't have to go out or do anything like that just yet. Wait until next session when Ken will run through exactly what we'd like you to do. For the time being, just check that it is somewhere nearby.
Thanks, Kathy.
I think that's it. Thanks. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.